Are you tired of watching shows that only give you general social media theory and expect you to figure out how to apply it to your own industry? Join us for this week's episode of Social Chatter, the industry's longest-running social media marketing news talk show. Not only will you learn the latest breaking news, but you'll also gain practical advice on how to apply it. Now here's your host, Christian Karasevich.
Welcome everyone to Social Chatter, your weekly social media marketing news talk show. This is episode 300 and I got to double check, 327 with myself and Sara Munro. And this week we're going to be talking all about Instagram subscriptions. So this is exactly what it sounds like. We're excited to talk about this because, well, there's a lot to unpack, I guess, here. And so for those of you who are new here, this is Social Chatter, the longest running social media marketing news talk show. And we bring you the latest social media news each week. And there certainly is a lot of it. So every single week, there's always a lot of things to keep up with. Sometimes it's little small changes. Sometimes it's big changes. For example, like Instagram subscriptions. In addition to that, we typically have a guest on, and we also talk about a tool of the week. Pretty straightforward show. But with that, I'm going to go and bring on Sara Munro, and we're going to kick things off. So Sara, how you doing?
I'm great. And yes, the time has come to really seriously talk about subscriptions. And what better place than Instagram, right? We've been talking about it for different platforms, and now it has come for the paid social media world, right?
Very true. Yes. So we got a lot of news this week. So I know Instagram subscriptions is that big thing, right?
It is the big thing. So why don't we just jump in? This week, we don't have another guest. You get Christian and me talking about all that we know about subscriptions and other social media news this week. So jumping into Instagram, we have just seen this circling of ideas of this subscription service for social media for quite some time. We've talked about Twitter Blue 3 times in this last year. We'll put links to the shows 287, 294, and 317. We talked about Facebook Bulletin coming out in 298, show 298. YouTube memberships have been around for a long time. So now Instagram is jumping into the game. And I have to say, I'm impressed that the executives at Meta used Meta properties to make this announcement. So Mark Zuckerberg himself posted on Facebook that this was coming. And then Adam Mosseri actually posted a reel. He didn't use Twitter this time. He's learning, right, to do the news, post news on his own platform. So they are running out, testing subscriptions. They are using a handful of US-based creators. They're calling them alpha testers. How's that for interesting, right? Alpha testers. And this isn't a big open door for all kinds of creators to start using this. This is a very controlled test group. And what they are going to do is let people subscribe. Subscription rates will be set by the creator, starting at 99 cents, going up to $99.99, which seems, I mean, you got to be producing a lot of interesting content for someone to pay you $100 a month, I have to say. Anyway, I'm sure there are people out there who will do it. At this point, Meta is not taking any fees. They're standing firm with their commitment not to take any cuts of any money that goes to creators or any brand pages or anyone who's using stars. On Facebook, it's called stars. On Instagram, it's called badges. So any of that revenue going to the people producing that content, Meta is not taking a cut from it. But keep in mind that the app stores do. So Apple is still taking their 30% fee. So this is going to be content. The content that they're saying is going to roll out are going to be subscription-only lives and subscription-only stories. And then subscribers will be able to get a little digital badge on their profile. Not sure what that's going to look like, but let's keep in mind when we're talking about badges on Instagram, it's kind of funny because they switch between this vernacular very seamlessly. I know that we're all used to digital badges being some kind of little certificate, right? Or little ribbon that you can have on your profile. When Instagram is talking about badges as a payment, think of it like YouTube Super Chat or Super Thanks. Think about it like Facebook Stars. It's actually a payment method that people are using to pay Instagram creators. So I think it's really interesting. The statement that was part of this press release from Instagram is really interesting. So I'm going to read it. It says, "We believe creators should know their audience and have more control over their business. We hope to build tools to allow them to also directly connect with their audience off platform in the future." So we got to wonder, what does that mean for the future? But it seems to fall into place with all of the things that Meta is doing as a company. So if we look at Facebook, Facebook has ticketing software and tools for people who are building out events. There's different payment forms. There's shopping on both Instagram and Facebook. There's all kinds of these tools that are helping people just use Facebook and Instagram. And I think that's what they are trying to do. Other platforms are trying to do as well, so that people aren't using things like Hopin or Zoom or other payment services like Patreon for their exclusive content, that they're still using the platforms. So I've chatted on enough about what the news was about this. So Christian, what do you think about this?
This is going to be, I got to say, you bring up some really good points just about subscriptions overall.
Mm-hmm.
I got to say, I kind of expected this. We got a great comment, by the way, too, from Bob Farnham saying, hey, will Facebook ever charge as well? And I anticipate they will. I think you're going to see the same thing that's happening to Instagram. I think you're going to see the same thing happen to Facebook, because most social media platforms are moving that direction anyway. They're moving to, it's interesting. They're basically, if you think about it, they're moving to a paywall.
Well, the web in general is moving to a paywall, right?
It is, yes.
We've had this blissful 20 years of free content, right? Well, I shouldn't say blissful 20 years of free content, because news organizations have put up paywalls. They've had to. They can't stay in business. They can't create content, pay reporters, and offer everything for free. And we're finally getting there with creators, right? That artists, performers, people who are providing coaching services or makeup tutorials, their time, their expertise has a cost, and they need to make a living if they're going to keep doing this. So we're just going to move more and more and more to this paid content.
Yeah. And it's rather interesting, I guess. The part you mentioned that I think really sticks out for me is, so it is going to go through the App Store, by the way. So, there's another little piece to this. So creators right now, it's very limited to a number of creators to be able, like very limited, meaning alpha is like, hey, we think we're going to roll this out and we only want to work with a very select number of people. And then we'll roll it into beta at some point. So, a couple of points I think are really important. For starters, the fact that, you can charge 99 cents up to $100. I think that range that's a really big range. And what I was thinking when you mentioned that was, this goes back to like the App Store. So when Apple launched iPhone, a number of years ago, they rolled out an App Store, and then they let creators kind of charge what they wanted, but things kind of also fell in line. Like, there are a couple of apps out there that are like $50 or $60, but that's not the norm. Most of them are, 99. Most of them are 99 cents, or most of them are free with an in-app purchase.
Right.
And I kind of see that model being, I actually think that would be a better model than just having hey, you have to, if you follow like 10 creators and each one charges like $2, like that's $20 a month you have to pay to all those creators. And I could see the subscriptions quickly adding up. So I think the price thing is going to be one thing they're going to have to kind of figure out, not just from a creator standpoint, but like what actually makes sense from an economic standpoint. The other piece to that I also think, so they're starting off with this on like on the device, which means if it's running, for example, on iOS, you're having to pay Apple 30%, which I agree with.
Yeah.
And the other side to this is Facebook's also going to be trying to highlight how much of that is actually going to Apple.
Mhm.
So just to kind of like, so that kind of gets to the point that you mentioned about potentially moving off platform at some point.
Right. They raised a big stink about it in
Yeah.
July, I want to say, when Meta said, "Listen, pandemic is hard on everybody. We're not taking a cut from creators." And I think that's a great stand. They're making enough revenue on other things. The question for the creator, though, is that 30% cut make it worth it? Or do you keep promoting something like Patreon? I subscribe to a creative in France. He's a
Yeah.
filmmaker and author, and I get access to some exclusive content and some travel blogs and things like that he's put together. So I see value in that.
Right.
He only has to pay the credit card fees, right? Or I
Yeah.
can choose to pay the credit card fee, and that's it.
Mhm.
And is it worthwhile for a creator to do this? Do you lose more money from AdSense, right? If you have this paywall content, are you then losing what you might get on YouTube AdSense or other ads that may play or display
Yeah.
around your content? So that's the balance point that creators have to think about. And this isn't just, the bloggers and the celebrities and things like that. I think this can be something, and we're going to talk about it later in the show. It can be something for others to use. And what's good about it, it's where people are. It's where people are spending their time. They don't have to go to their email. They don't have to go somewhere else. So, it's interesting how this kind of content will rank too. If you as a subscriber will get some kind of special notice, or what is it that you'll know that you have your exclusive content coming to you?
Yeah, it's
So,
good. It's going to be fascinating. I mean, and we have some questions later on the show that we want to talk about also in terms of like, what are some of the like, all about exclusive content,
yeah.
Um,
And Bob, I have to laugh at Bob. He said, "Travel, what's that?" I know, Bob, but we will travel someday.
Absolutely.
So,
And so in terms of like Instagram subscription, so let's talk about a couple
mhm.
other things here. So
Yep.
okay, so we know that obviously like we know what Instagram subscriptions are. How do you go about getting Instagram subscriptions?
Well, right now you can't. Instagram has chosen, I think, about 7 or 8 people who are the alpha testers to see how this will go and how it will work. And it's good that they have selected the creators, because they know these are people who can actually produce the content, who have the following, who have the interest. They probably did some kind of metric on how many people they already have, either giving them badges. Remember, that's Instagram's payment way, or
Uh-huh.
Facebook stars, or whatever it is, Patreon subscribers, whatever it is. They know that they have an audience who's willing to pay. So they're doing a good test, I have to say, and they're doing it very publicly. It'll be interesting if they decide, hey, this isn't what Instagram is about, and just abandon the idea and maybe put it into Facebook. Facebook paid groups may come up. Who knows? This is definitely a sandbox trial to play around with the functionality and see if it's something that will be viable in the future, not just for Meta financially, but for creators and just the social media community within Meta itself.
Got it. And again, I mean, just to kind of reiterate, I think to everyone as well, that this feature is, it's only available to select creators. So you have to have been invited into Instagram's program. You can't change that. And
Mhm.
then the other thing is like it's a test. So chances are they are going to roll this out completely to everyone. Um, I don't know. You got any parting thoughts you want to share on IG subscriptions?
I guess watch Adam's reels, pay attention to Adam's Instagram account, Adam Mosseri's Instagram account, and we'll see how it's going. He's being much more, he sort of has this fireside chat thing where he just sits down and talks to the camera about what's happening on Instagram. And I think that's where we'll find out what's going on with it. So,
Fantastic. Okay, so that's
yeah.
obviously some big news, and obviously we know that also competes with Twitter Blue as well. So again,
Mhm.
I mean, I think you're going to start to see, in a way, LinkedIn sort of already kind of has this, with their like LinkedIn learning program.
Yep. And YouTube memberships. YouTube has had memberships forever, channel subscriptions and memberships and exclusive content for people who do super thanks and all those kinds of things. So YouTube has been doing this for a long time. It'll be interesting to see what the others, YouTube seems more like I'm subscribing to a channel, right? It's like I'm subscribing to Disney Plus or Hulu or something. I get this one channel and get to be part of that community, which I'm sure is huge for gamers and for lots of creators.
Yeah.
So
I gotta say, if one thing I'm glad you brought up like Disney Plus and Apple Music and subscriptions like that. Here's the thing. I actually think they need to revamp. Even though Instagram subscriptions is not out yet, I think they need to revamp the model. I don't think that the model, the way they're moving it is, when you think about like you mentioned a Disney Plus, right? Or Netflix, somebody pays $14, $15 a month, right? For that service. And it gets them access to a huge catalog of content, like a massive catalog, right?
Right.
And they're always adding things and whatnot. And the thing is, if I think about that and I think, okay, well, if I go with Instagram subscriptions, I don't think I'm going to get anywhere near that $15 doesn't seem like a lot, but it for the amount of content you get, it's a lot, right? I don't think you're going to actually get $15. Like, what I mean? You get where I'm going, right?
If you get it ad free, if you get to have certain controls over your content or your kids,
right?
If hey, if I pay Instagram $10 a month and my kid will be protected from predators, probably pay that amount, right?
Yeah. So what I'm looking at, I guess, when I look at two models is Instagram wants to have it where the individual creator charges $1 to $100.
Yep.
Versus if I go like a Disney Plus or Netflix.
Platform fee. Yeah.
That actually, to me, makes a lot more sense. And then the company, like i.e. Disney, can make those contracts with the, with the actor, the musician, et cetera, right? Like, to me, I don't know. To me, that seems like it makes more sense. And maybe that's the direction they're going to head. To me, that seems like it makes more sense, I think.
Well, yeah. Isn't that where Twitter Blue is going? Isn't Twitter Blue platform wide? I don't know enough about Twitter Blue. You may know more.
Twitter Blue is moving toward, it was platform. It was still related to like the individual. So
yeah. So it's still a subscription. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the question is, would people pay for a platform wide subscription?
Personally, I think platform wide makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I mean, and maybe they are moving that direction. I mean, because then that goes back to like what Bob was talking about. How at some point maybe Twitter will, or maybe Facebook will follow suit. Again, maybe they're doing what we think they're doing, which is maybe they're testing Instagram subscriptions, and then then maybe they'll move that into Facebook when they figure out, well, hey, it makes more sense to charge a monthly fee. Who knows? So
right.
Yeah.
Right. It's what was that scene from Jurassic Park where some of the dinosaurs were throwing themselves against electric fences to test it to see who would survive, right? I think that's kind of what they're doing right now, is just the Wild West to see what will survive. So
definitely. So Instagram subscriptions, pay attention to those. You'll start to see them on some of your favorite creators. You want to quickly list out just who some of those were, Sarah?
Oh, you know what? I closed the window. I didn't recognize any of the names.
Okay. So I did pull it up. And I would 100% agree with you, because I looked at it and I was like, I'm not sure who some of these people are. Like there's an Olympic silver medalist, Jordan Childs, Elliot Norris, a digital creator, Kelsey Lynn Cook, a dancer, actress, and model, Eliza Kelly, an astrologer, Sedona, a basketball player, a spiritual coach and artist, Bunny Michael. So, and there's a few other ones listed as well. Not a lot. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you recognize it. I don't know if anyone recognizes those if you're watching, but I don't know. I don't recognize any of those names. But it'll be interesting. And I just, before we switch to the next topic, I want to make sure we bring up just a couple of points from NLTMW says, hey, he could see paid Facebook groups being popular. Absolutely. Like
I'm part of one. Part of one. Yeah. Well, I paid for the membership, the training membership with someone through her website, and she uses Facebook groups as the way to manage us as a community.
And if you kind of think about the bigger picture, the thing Facebook has always been trying to do, like they're trying to overtake, basically overtake the web. And that's, and if they went the route of a Facebook group and they offered a subscription at some point, I think that could definitely, I think it would make things a little bit easier.
Right.
In terms of like managing.
Yeah. They want to take it over the web. They have to improve their search again.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Absolutely. Nope.
Yeah.
And so that's that one. And then the other point that NLTMW also brings up is that, again, kind of going back to what I talked about a minute ago, Instagram subscriptions, they want to have it where individual creators charge per subscription. And I made the, argument that, well, maybe they should go the Disney route or the Netflix route and offer one fee from Instagram or Facebook that unlocked all that content. He says, hey, but the small creator would never get paid. And I mean, again, it's a balance, and we'll talk more about the small creator in a few minutes.
Well, it's a very valid point. With all of the different funds that they have out there, how many small creators are actually getting a piece of that? How many hundreds of millions of dollars that everybody is throwing at creators right now? So
definitely. So that's IG subscriptions, Instagram subscriptions. Sarah, where do we go from here?
There's one more piece of Instagram news. I'm a little skeptical about this because it has to do with rearranging your grid. Is that there's some people are seeing the opportunity to rearrange the images on your grid. And this is really important to some people who are visual designers or just have a very specific design aesthetic so that you can move the images around. And Christian, actually, I dropped in the chat, there is a visual designer's Instagram account that I just found that would demonstrate this. So some people organize their grids. It's just whatever it is they're feeling at the moment. And that's sort of what my Instagram grid looks like. It's like, oh, today I took a picture of snow, right? And it's next to a picture of a flower, whatever. It's whatever kind of pops into my mind. But other creators want to have sort of a very clear aesthetic. They post in a series of posts so that things either lay out vertically or they lay out in columns. And now the new thing that's come up is sort of this puzzle piece together. So all of these images, when you look at the profile as a whole, it creates a big image. And that can mean that some of the posts may look a little odd when people see it pop up in their feed, which in some ways works, right? It may generate some interest with people saying, oh, hey, what is that? What does that mean? And other times it may just be like, I don't even care, unfollow, or just keep scrolling past and never see what you're trying to do. So I think it makes sense for some folks, others probably not. It's a lot of work to try to do that on your Instagram grid, but it works for a lot of people. I don't want to disparage it completely. Those vertical lines, the columns work great and has had great success for a lot of people. So I don't know how many people are really going to do the puzzle part of it, though.
I gotta say, if I'm a business, I think this is a distraction. It's great. It's great I can do it, but I think that it just gets down to it's a distraction. If you're focused on business, it's
if your business is design, if your business is right. I remember the first time I saw it come out, the puzzle come out, it was a few years ago. It was a band who was leading up to releasing an album. And it was kind of cool. You got to see one piece of the cover art, right? So they released the cover art over the course of 3 days to generate some buzz. That was kind of fun and cool. But if I just see a random hand and a few sparkly bits in the design come up, I'm like, okay, whatever. Just keep scrolling.
Here's the other thing. It's also going to come back to this. And I'll use Facebook as an example. So Facebook has Facebook pages, and a lot of people never visit a Facebook page. So you could put all this effort into a Facebook page, or in this case, an Instagram account, but it's going to come down to somebody visiting the profile. So
I think Instagram. So I've actually seen this on one account. My visits to the profile page on one has gone up about 20% over the last 3 months, but we're using link in bio a lot more. We had only used link in bio a few times a year. It's like, hey, tickets are available here, or we announced find this piece of content that is deadline driven. with the link in the bio. So we never really use link in bio for all of our posts. And now we're doing that, and we have a very clear call to action, and people are going to the profile. So
Okay.
I do see it happen. The question is, are they just going, when you open up the profile, you find the link that you're looking for and you just click on it? Are they scrolling? I don't get that data to know if they're really scrolling through. So
interesting. Well,
yeah.
so that's some Instagram news this week. What other news do we have going on this week?
Other news, we're going to jump to Pinterest for a minute.
Sure, let's do it.
So Pinterest has released a report this week about men using Pinterest. And I have to say, why aren't men using Pinterest? I really don't get it. I know a lot of men who use Evernote and all these other different apps when they could just be using Pinterest. And the men I know who use Pinterest think it's the most awesome thing ever because they can just organize a lot of different things. They can put together a project. I know one close friend was doing some plumbing on this island that his family had a summer camp on, and they had to do all these different pipes and all this different arrangements for it. And so he just every time he did a search and found some interesting stuff, he'd just drop it in to the board and all the other family members could see it. So what we're seeing is that men in the US, so the data right now in this report is just US based. Sorry about that, other folks. But 27% of men aged 25 to 54 in the US use Pinterest. And this is a jump because I looked back at some of the Pew Research reports that were saying about 16% a year or two ago. So we know that Pinterest is like the number 4 app in the US right now. I know TikTok is getting a lot of play, but Pinterest has been this slowly rising thing, just like LinkedIn. People have been slowly going over to Pinterest and LinkedIn much more and more over the last couple of years. So what the report has is a lot of trends. They polled the male Pinterest users about what their intentions were, how they were going to use Pinterest. And I think one of the key points is that 75% of the men who use Pinterest say that they're going to spend more this year. And among those people, they do less searches for products. So if you kind of do the math and extrapolate out things, if you want to sell to men in that key demographic, that key interest group, this could be a great place for you to be for your social media strategy. So I think it's great. I don't understand why more men don't use Pinterest, but there's that. The other piece of news is that they're putting a profile tab into their search section. So when you do a search on Pinterest, you're going to see discover, can't remember what the middle one is, shop, and then profile. So what it does is, oh, look, I got it right. So what it's going to do is give you a better way, an easier way to find the profile when you do a search. So sort of like the other platforms. When you do a search on Facebook, you'll see the profiles, the pages or the profiles that may have posted something that you're searching for closer to the top. And YouTube lets you search by channel. Here you can actually go to the profile. So the speculation is that this will give people more access or quicker access to profiles on Pinterest. So it'll be interesting to see. They're hoping that their press release said they're hoping that this may help bring more money to creators. I got to say, Pinterest's creator fund is a bit lower than the other platforms at only $500K, but it's still something for creators, right? So this has been slowly rolling out since October.
Very cool.
So that's Pinterest news.
And I gotta say, in Pinterest news, I mean, I like the fact that we talked about like habits of guys like who are on Pinterest. The fact that I think for a lot of guys, I think it's not about it's not necessarily about the like some of it's the package, but it also might be like how it's actually used, or how to create something, and then they may want to actually, get their hands dirty and work on a project. So I think that's really like insightful to pay attention to that sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's a great, and I like the fact that Pinterest is adding the discovery feature, to search. So the fact that, it's great that I can like get to the content, but I also may want to get to the creator as well.
Right. Right.
So, and I like, and you know what's going to happen at some point. There's going to be more algorithm play in there, recommending, trying to recommend accounts, things like that, based off of other ones who you engage with, things like that. So there's a great comment, by the way, from NLTMW. He's saying, hey, do you think that the world event that can't be mentioned caused more men to use Pinterest when they were bored at home? What do you think?
Maybe I think the boredom, yeah, I'll say yes now that I consider it. I think Pinterest had been used in the past with just making collections, right? And if you are at home, looking to plan things that you will do when you're not in lockdown, yeah, it makes good logical sense.
Definitely does. Yeah. So, great question, by the way. So, okay. So we got that in Pinterest news. Is there any other news we want to talk about this week?
Twitter. We promised Twitter last week. So here's some Twitter news. We're going to do a bit of a flurry. Quick rundown through some Twitter. There's a lot. There's a lot. And we actually pared down this. We had, I think, another 4 stories about Twitter. So we're going to stick with a few things. One, TweetDeck columns are coming out. So it was earlier in the spring, I want to say late spring, probably May, June, Twitter announced that they were going to have a refresh to TweetDeck. I finally got it last week, and I hate it. I now know why so many people were complaining about the new TweetDeck. I will say visually it's nicer, but I have to rebuild and resort, and I just need to send out tweets, right? Which is why I use TweetDeck. Anyway, they're going to make it easier. I have to say there is a little bit of a learning curve to it. Whereas I'm used to the old TweetDeck that would actually make columns that I didn't want to make. So it was very, very easy to inadvertently put columns onto your TweetDeck. But now they're showing a way to more easily add it. So I would say if you're switching over to the new TweetDeck, spend some time with it. Don't just say, oh yeah, let me do that right as I'm trying to send out 8 tweets or schedule out 8 tweets. So do it when you have some time to really rebuild your deck. And I have to say, I do like that I can be a little more organized on TweetDeck. I don't have a giant horizontal scroll for the 7 accounts that I manage, but it is interesting, but beware, there is that time suck factor. Another piece, Twitter released a report called #Real Talk, and this is 50 pages of content. I have not gotten through it. I've read some of the highlights, and I have to say there's some really interesting stuff in there. If you are looking to expand on Twitter or just get to know Twitter better, they have a lot of data on polling users on what they want to see from brand pages, their expectations from brands, for instance, how fast a brand responds if there's a crisis. They're also explain that, no, we don't want to know what your, say, landscape company has to say about the new Mandalorian series, right? We want authentic conversations. So, and Twitter's been really, some of the screenshots that I've seen of the pages, they have some great advice for brands on how to create your tone, how to pick your topics, and how to engage with their community. I don't know what the hashtag data is in this report, but I'm really interested to dive into it to find out more about this. So again, it's a 50-page report. We've tweeted it out ourselves. We'll have the link in the show notes today, but definitely something to really dig into if you like this kind of thing. Another piece, reaction video. This is something that Twitter is testing. You can actually create a live video reaction to a tweet. So instead of quoting a tweet, you actually do this reaction to a tweet where the original tweet will show up kind of like a sticker, and you can record your video and then tweet it. What is not so much interesting about this fun little thing that they're putting out, what's really interesting is look at the full screen video. So that is width to width, top to bottom vertical video. Looks a lot like, TikTok. So I think that's what's most exciting about this. Twitter has been saying that they're going to go to this full screen experience, and this is the fun little tool that they're trying it with. And within this report about reaction videos, or the announcement of reaction videos, rolled into that is that Twitter has announced that they want 50% more users in the next 2 years. So this is the first time Twitter's put out a big audacious goal since Jack Dorsey left. And I got to say, that is a big audacious goal. Final Twitter news: Spaces has rolled out recording for all. We keep talking about it. I know I keep seeing it in our show notes and say, haven't we talked about this? Haven't we talked about this? Well, they've rolled it out to everybody now. If you have Spaces, I know we talked a couple of weeks ago to Juliet Stapleton, who said she still didn't have Twitter Spaces. So there may be parts of the world that don't have Twitter Spaces, but for those who do, you will be able to record them. The recording will be available for 30 days, but the host can download it. So if you want to use your Twitter Space for some other purpose, say a podcast or something like that, be sure to record your space before you start or as you start, and download it within a month so that you can repurpose that content. Very cool. Twitter, you're much more of a Twitter user than I am, Christian. So happy, sad?
I think some of these are, I gotta say, I like the TweetDeck functionality. I just know though that like, I already get this functionality in other products. So if I'm using a social media management tool, I already have access to this. But I do like the fact that they are starting to build out that tool. I kind of have wished that for the longest time that Twitter would build out TweetDeck a lot faster than they have. So maybe these are some of those changes. I got to say, out of all the news you kind of talked about, I think the most impressive to me is the Twitter reaction videos. I think that's actually pretty cool because it's an easy way. And here's the thing: if I were Twitter, I would make this. I mean, I almost would make that mobile only, because then that way I could easily film a reaction video versus, hey, I got to get my camera set up and my lighting and my microphone and things like that. Yeah. So, but I do like the fact that you can do reaction videos, or you'll be able to do them. Hopefully when they roll those out. In terms of Twitter Spaces, I mean, we record our Spaces as well. So if you are following us at Social Chefs, you'll be able to listen to our Spaces because we do broadcast those there. So awesome. Yeah. Lots of really good news there. So is there anything else we wanted to cover this week, or we wanted to talk about a couple questions? One
last piece of news from Snap.
Sure.
And I think it's important given the privacy concerns, the mental health concerns around children. Snapchat has announced that they are limiting adults' interactions with minors by not suggesting accounts owned by people who are under the age of 18 to accounts that are over the age of 18, which makes me wonder, why is this a thing anyway? Right? And it actually was a thing on Instagram up until about the last year, that adults on these platforms would be suggested accounts to follow that were underage people, which just astounds me that this is actually a thing. And reminds me, it's a new year, and good practice for everybody is to look at your social media policies. If you are running a business or nonprofit, or just your general policies as a user on social media, what are your practices? I have to say, I have been the poor beleaguered PR person who has had to take the call from a reporter saying, did you know that this problem employee had this inappropriate interactions with someone else on social media? And it's really uncomfortable to be in that position and to also be called out. You know, this can also be an individual who can be called out saying, hey, what are you doing with all of this interactions that you have with a minor? I got into a huge fight with a colleague when I was working in youth services about her interactions with one of the students in our programs. And she said, well, I'm just encouraging him. And I said, what? He's 14 years old. you can do that in other ways when we are in program time and not in your personal time through your personal social media accounts. So it's something to really think about this year as we are looking more at safety, security, privacy, to be good people on social media and look at what your behavior is, and also protecting everybody within the community too. The other piece, Snap has, it's a fun piece to go with along with the heavy piece, and that Snap is adding some fun things to their messaging. I was really surprised with this. I don't use Snap messaging, so I was unaware that they did not have these ways to pull someone out of a group feed and have a private chat with them, adding Bitmojis, polls, and calling features. So I think those of us who are so used to WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger, where we've had all of this for a long time, so it was a surprise to me that it's happening on Snap.
Yeah, and I gotta say this. I mean, just overall, I think that if I and this is now we're gonna get into some Q&A, but like I think the key takeaway I think from this week's show is that even though there's like a lot of topics, like we talked about Snap and we talked about Twitter and we talked about um, Pinterest and Instagram and whatnot, like
Mm-hmm.
just remember this: as a business, you do not need to be on every platform. You
Mm-hmm.
need to have a presence. Like you should have an account, for example, or at least claim the account. But you don't need to like, it's not like I need to take that shotgun approach and like put the same thing everywhere. Like
Mm-hmm.
the key thing is going to be pick a platform where it's going to best fit your business. And remember, you are going to have to shift at times because platforms add and remove features. And
Right.
so, but pick like where the demographic is. For example, if Instagram is where your business needs to spend the time, where you tend to see like the most growth, then spend the time there cultivating your Instagram presence, as opposed to, oh, well, I also need to be on Snapchat because they have this feature, and I need to be on Twitter because they have this feature, and Pinterest has this one. Like, find the one that's going to give you the most return. Put the time into that one platform or that second platform, and then consider adding other ones as you've kind of, so you can scale instead
Right.
of doing what most people do, which is try to get on every single one. And then they're like, well, it's just too much to kind of keep up with, because it is a lot to keep up with. I mean, and
Yeah.
speaking of that, we're going to do a Q&A session now, right?
Yes, we are. We're going to talk about subscriptions a little bit more among each other, because we thought, how are we going to do Q&A when we don't have a guest? But Christian and I have a lot of thoughts about subscriptions and how they can work, not just for those creators, but for businesses, for small businesses and nonprofits. So we're just going to start out with, what was the first question we thought we were going to ask, Christian? I've even forgotten it. How can you,
So,
what
I
types
think,
of content can be part of a subscription, right?
yeah. So we want to talk about how to manage subscription overload, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
as we both know, I mean, we mentioned subscriptions and we're like, oh my gosh, like we were kind of, we're kind of doing the rough numbers in our head and say like, hey, you know what? It's easy to like, if it's $1 a month, let's just say that.
Right.
If
Right.
you're paying $1 a month to a creator and you're like, well, okay, I'll get 10 creators or 5 creators. Let's just say it's
Mm-hmm.
10, right? That's $10 I'm giving to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it's like only $1 a person, it adds up.
Mm-hmm.
So what we were going to talk about was, with Instagram subscriptions, what you're paying for is exclusive access. So you're
Mm-hmm.
paying for exclusive access to, in the Instagram case, it could be Instagram live video or stories content.
Right.
And obviously you get that whole badging thing.
Mm-hmm.
So what we wanted to talk about was what types of content should a business be creating that's exclusive for their followers. Do you have any advice or tips on that, Sarah?
Well, I was thinking about some of the creators that I follow. So I already explained that that creator in France that I follow, that
Okay.
I get 1 or 2 exclusive videos a month, and have some exclusive content to things like wallpapers of these pretty scenes in France. And he produced a tour guide, a guide to Paris and things like that. So I have access to that. I was also thinking about one of my favorite food writers is Dory Greenspan.
Okay.
And when Bulletin first came out from Facebook this summer, she was one of the first on the bulletin board, the bulletins. So I subscribed to her right away. So once a week, I get this lovely email from Dory about what she's cooking, what she's doing, and a recipe. And I kind of thought about the subscription thing. Would I say pay $5 a month to get her newsletter and maybe a cooking class from her, right? So $5 a month, that's $60 a year. I've already paid for a Dory Greenspan cooking class. I took a cooking class from her at Stonewall Kitchen a couple of years ago, which was $55. So what is that balance? Would I move from being like that one-time user? I'm taking some art classes right now. I pay for those once, whenever I do it. So it's like $10 to $20, depending on the class and the producer, right? And I do that once a month. Would I pay, and sometimes I don't do it at all. Would I switch that from paying $10 or $15 for a virtual class, to $5 a month and have exclusive access to all of the classes, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So is there a benefit to that? And you and I were talking too, how could this be used for retailers? And we both sort of thought, well, probably not retailers. But then I was thinking, wait a second. I took a class from Stonewall Kitchen. If I subscribe to their cooking school channel or access, right, at $5 a month, again, $60 a year, that's a typical price of one of their classes. And then I have access to all of their classes. Yeah, I might actually do that. So, but the business has to decide, is that a better revenue generator for us? Is it better to have 200 Saras paying us $5 a month versus the 20 people paying us $60 a month? I don't know. That's the math that they have to do themselves, and the creators have to do themselves, right?
Yeah. So can you repeat that? Okay. So the business needs to decide what?
Just decide if it's better to have, say, the volume, more people paying less versus fewer people paying more, if that makes sense, right?
Absolutely.
So
that makes a lot of sense, actually.
if we use that cooking class as an example, there's probably 20 people in a cooking class at Stonewall Kitchen. They run a few, 4 or 5 a week. Is that a better revenue than saying having 200 or 300 people pay $5 a month for every month of the year? So maybe there's someone who's not on camera who's doing the math for us. But the other thing is producing the content, right? For maybe a cooking school like Stonewall Kitchen, they could still have all of those people in person. And then for a smaller fee, if you're not nearby their in-person school, you get access to their content for wherever you are in the world. And that adds to your revenue.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
So I think that's a good first step in terms of they've got to decide which format's going to work best. And then I think in terms of like what type of content they should be creating, we talked about a couple of different industries. Like we said, hey, makeup and beauty, like, make a lot of sense. Like, for example, you could give one example away for free. Like it could be a level 1 or level 2, and then you could have a more advanced one that somebody has to pay for. So it could be, so we could put like access to more advanced video tutorials.
Right.
That could be something that somebody gets. What else?
And a lot of beauty vloggers have products too. So perhaps if you are a subscriber, every quarter you get a little pack of trial samples of whatever is the new product that comes out too, right? So you can build in these exclusive packages. The question is, I think the bigger question related to today's show is, if you're willing to put in all of this work and produce this content and this sort of the campaign that people move through as they become more and more loyal subscriber to you, do you put that work in and own them on your website and your email list? Or do you use a platform like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter Blue, whatever other platform, where you are beholden to the App Store fees and also the whatever comes and goes as far as functionality within those platforms? And here's the kicker that's hard for nonprofits when it comes to meta money, is
Mhm.
that you don't get the contact information for people.
Yeah.
You have to chase them down, or they have to come to you with their contact information. So say I run a Facebook fundraiser, I can see the names if they choose not to be anonymous, but I have no way of contacting them. And sometimes Messenger is actually locked down to me and contacting them through that nonprofit account. So I have to respond. If they did a public post, I can respond to them and say, hey, thank you so much. We appreciate your gratitude. Contact us. We'd love to stay in touch, kind of thing. So to try to entice them to actually give us their contact information so that we can follow up.
Definitely.
Um,
So like the
so-
access to more, so advanced video tutorials, I'd
Mhm.
say, like, think of it like this, I guess. I'd almost use the cow analogy, I guess. You could give somebody a taste, but you're not going to give them like a jug of milk to take
Mhm.
home, for example, or a gallon. Let's use
Right,
that as example, right?
right.
You can give them a taste and then they can decide whether they want to buy it at that point. So it's
Mhm.
like, so give them access to like advanced video tutorials, things that are going to like, maybe it's like, let's just say it's worksheets, like
Yep,
worksheets.
resources and white papers. You may have special events and special guests. Maybe you have a subscriber event with a special guest. Like we could do a Social Chefs subscriber event where we actually have a really big name guest, and only those people who subscribe have a chance to hear from that guest and ask them questions in real time.
Okay.
For nonprofits, we've done it for a long time, these donor exclusive events, right? That there's something behind the scenes that you can do, like big donors at a museum get to go talk to the archivist, or you get a behind the scenes view at the aquarium, or special nights where there's an event, there's a new exhibit going on, and those who are patrons get to see it first and hear from maybe the museum CEO, and then it's open to the public the next day. So think of this is a place where the business world can really take a lesson from the nonprofit world and the
Yeah.
arts world, because patrons of the arts have always had exclusive access to artists, going way back to the days of the salons of Europe, where the intellectuals would gather and think big things and talk big things and drink and debauchery and all of that kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? So how can you build that in a virtual world? Or do you decide, you know what? The world is connected enough. I'm just going to connect with my people in person instead.
Definitely, yeah. So very good points, yeah. And so we just have a couple of comments here. One last question.
Mhm.
So I think like for starters, NLTMW brings up a great point. Retail 101, higher priced items versus volume at lower prices. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
something you're going to want to play with, and there's no magic number to say, well, this is exactly how it needs to be. It depends on your business. What works best for you versus, oh well, this is exactly what somebody else does, I'm going to follow them. Yeah, it works
Right.
for certain places, it works certain ways. So just keep
Right.
that in mind.
Yep.
And then the other thing, this is also from NLTMW, says, I see many smaller creators struggling with feeling guilty to give extra value to Patreon supporters versus working on their longer form public content.
Mhm.
So yes, that is the slippery slope part of subscriptions.
Yep.
You have a lot of people that, they think like, oh, well, like I need to just give and give and give to people who are paying. There is a threshold you're going to have to set at some point, and you're going to have to be comfortable with it. And it's going to make you uncomfortable, I think, to begin with.
Right.
And
And it doesn't have to be a big thing, right? That creator that I'm a Patreon of, I got a sticker, right? I get a thank you note every so often. I get a thank you note from someone on their team. Um, it doesn't have to be a ton of stuff, right?
right.
It can also be photos too, right? That if you are creating beautiful content, take some stills and give those to your patrons only.
Yeah, exactly. Like that,
Yeah.
or just, or give them some access to you. You got lots of
Mhm.
options there to
Mhm.
consider. Now, the other question that we had, and this I think is the bigger question, I think, how can you control all this subscription fatigue? Because, like I said, as you kind of think
Mhm.
about this, yeah, it's only 99 cents and it's 99, but it adds up.
Yeah. Especially
So,
when let's think about what we subscribe to here, right? We use
mhm,
StreamYard, we use Canva,
mhm.
we pay for
Website hosting,
website
email service. Yeah.
hosting, email service, um, social media management tools. I have the Adobe suite too. So
Yeah.
all of these things that keep adding up and adding up for your business. But here's the thing. This is where the entertainment budget comes from, right? When it comes from the user side, it's the entertainment budget. And what is that? If your content is good, then they will subscribe to it. If your content can be used for professional development, let's, think about that. When we
Mhm.
talk about beauty bloggers and things like that, yeah, we mostly think of the fun, entertaining teenagers who like to see that kind of thing, or, whoever their core audience is,
Yeah.
want to see that. But if you're a makeup artist, that could be real value to your business, to learn new techniques so that you're constantly evolving your business. So that's a business expense, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
My Spotify account is a business expense because I build playlists for live events for my client when we have live events, right?
Yeah.
So I have all the playlists for all of these client events.
Yeah, no,
So
that's excellent. Excellent
yeah,
points. Yeah. So in
yeah.
terms of managing subscription fatigue, how can people do it?
Oh, I wish I knew. We have a tool of the week. Should we talk about the tool of the week? I think you have to sort of sit down and decide, what is it that is bringing me the most value,
Okay.
um, and what am I willing to pay for right now? A lot of people aren't going out as much. We're not traveling as much. So things like this, um, yeah, are part of that. And if it's not a monthly subscription, then maybe it's you putting $5 in a super thanks or something like that. Or, there are subscriptions that are not on a social media platform that I keep talking about Patreon, but there's several like Patreon, Buy Me a
Mhm.
Coffee, all these other things, right? And if you find value in a piece of content from that creator, you can just send them $5, right?
Yeah.
Say, I learned a lot from you today. I appreciate you. Here's $5. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Because we're not going to the conferences right now. We're not going to the networking events. We may have backed out on some of our business network memberships, like to chambers or special associations, things like
Mhm.
that. Here's a way for you to provide a little bit of value to the folks who are producing the content and showing your appreciation for it.
Definitely. Yeah. And
So,
I want to make sure we touch on this comment from NLTW who says,
mhm,
let me find it. So as a consumer slash supporter, and this is a great way, by the way, if you don't regularly review your subscriptions, he says, as a consumer supporter, that's how I look at my comfort level of support, initially to support the creator, but after a year, I reflect, review what the value was to me as well. And
mhm,
then, so once you kind of do that, then you can go back and you can look at it and say, well, okay, um, how can I, like, are there subscriptions that what are, like, I'd say start with like a month, like you should be tracking like what you subscribe to, so
mhm.
that then you don't, it's not like, oh, I get the credit card statement, I just pay it. Look at like what you're subscribing to, like what you're paying for. And so if you notice like, well, hey, I'm paying $50 a month, wow, that's a lot for a bunch of creators, right? Every
Mhm.
single month, that then means that might be less that I can spend somewhere else or can save. And
Right.
so make it regular practice, I think, to overcome subscription fatigue. Make it regular
Mhm.
practice to review um, what you are actually like subscribing to.
Right.
And I also like this, the NLTMW, I got to say, you've given us some really great tips this morning.
Mhm.
He's saying, hey, in March, I began working from home and this is 2020, and started redirecting my
Oh,
gasoline budget. This is actually smart.
Yeah.
started redirecting his gasoline budget to help creators who needed it.
Yep.
And that's a great thing. I mean, if you're spending, for example, if you're spending $50 a week on gas, like let's say
Mhm.
it was $50 a week, that's $200 roughly a month. You don't have to spend $200 on creators, but you could say, well, okay, I'll spend $50 of that on a creator. That makes a lot of sense because then you can and make it a good one because then that way you can get the most value and bang for your buck out of that. So,
Mhm.
so that is an option. And he also said, hey, he could buy another microphone as well if he wants to up his studio game. But
Yeah.
again, things to think about. Lots of
Yeah.
really good feedback there.
Yeah, we've had to think about it over the last few years too with newspapers. Remember newspapers? Do we all
Yeah.
remember newspapers? If we want good journalism, we need to pay for it. So yeah, I do subscribe to the New York Times and the Washington Post. In some ways, I need to use them for. I work in some cause related areas where I do need to be able to share that content, and if I hit the paywall every month, I don't get to read the content that I want to read. So yeah, I pay for good content, reward people who are doing good work so that maybe some of the trashier content falls away. And we all get to see the good stuff through the algorithms too. So yeah. So pull out the spreadsheet, add up what you're doing, and evaluate the value that you're getting from it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I
New
think
year,
like this is,
right?
this is a really good tip. So in terms of like managing subscription fatigue, review them regularly. And then I think in terms of like, I'd almost say like continue to level up.
Mhm.
So I think like, how can you control subscription fatigue? I would say constantly evaluate and seek out the most value that you can
Mhm.
get.
Right. Right. Yeah, when I look at what I'm paying to Patreon or to other subscriptions for creators specifically, I sort of think, okay, did I watch a couple of things? Did I get entertainment out of that? Is it the price of a movie ticket?
Yeah.
Yes. So, all right. Is it the same level of enjoyment that I would have had if I'd gone to the movies? Yes. And so reward that creator for that.
Very
Um,
true. Okay, so
yeah.
and so lastly, the last thing we just wanted to touch on real quick is a tool of the week,
Tool of the week.
and and how relevant that tool of the week, Sarah, is.
It's
It's
very
TrueBill, right? Yes.
TrueBill. We had a different. I'm hoping people are laughing as they're watching this, laughing with us, right? Because we had a different tool of the week, and I said, wait a second, we're talking about how to manage your subscription fatigue, how to manage all of these things that you're paying for, and this is something that I hear on practically every podcast that I listen to, because TrueBill is actually supporting creators in this way to get this out there. So TrueBill is actually an app that helps you very quickly unsubscribe to different subscription services that you have, to take a look at everything that you're paying monthly and make those financial decisions for yourself in a very easy way to do it. So I haven't used TrueBill. I have looked into it. Christian, have you looked into TrueBill?
I have looked into it as well. I make sure that I like. You also have to look, like a lot of credit card apps, for example, have similar functionality. So you
Mhm.
may need, depending on the credit card, you may not have that functionality. Some credit cards do. So, just check what your card provides. And if it
Mhm.
doesn't, consider checking out TrueBill, socialchefs.com/go/TrueBill. And
Mhm.
basically, what it can do is it can help you track your spending habits.
Yeah.
So, and it's not just like, oh, well, I spend X amount on this. It also can look at it from a categorical standpoint as well. This goes into entertainment. This goes into, you know, um, uh, like utilities, things like that. So
Yeah.
just kind
Yeah.
of keep that in mind. But that's TrueBill. In terms of the cost, actually, what is the cost of TrueBill actually?
I didn't even look it up. I will say, when you mentioned that some banks do this,
Yeah.
my bank, I use USAA, and they have had this budget tracking for years, years and years and years, because they're not a physical bank. It's all a virtual bank. And it is still a little cumbersome to use, to categorize some of the things and have it work through. So what I really like about TrueBill, as I was diving into it, I like the dashboards. I like the interface. I like that I can really look at all of my spending habits. We brought it up a little tongue in cheek about the subscription piece, but that's just a nice bonus to add to it, is that it makes it a lot easier when I'm considering, okay, how much did I really use Adobe Creative Suite this month? And do I really need to keep it going when I use Canva so much more, right?
Right.
So you get to see those you get to evaluate it a little more easily when it's visually more appealing for you. And I really liked those layouts that TrueBill has.
Yeah. And in terms of cost, so conveniently, it is a subscription service. But it is between $3 and $12 a month, depending on what you need access to. Now, in terms of, but here's the thing, you have to look at it from the bigger picture. Maybe it's worth paying for that, maybe pay for it for 1 month or 3-month basis, and get an idea of like what your spending habits are. And then, for example, if you're paying $36, let's say it's $36 or $144 a year, but it can save you hundreds of dollars in the long run, or thousands of dollars, then consider, consider using it and then getting your subscriptions under control, and then canceling at that point. But that is TrueBill. So I gotta say, this has been a fantastic show, Sarah. Like, talking about Instagram subscriptions, closing it out with, some ways to help people better manage those subscriptions. My last parting thought, I think, would be that, constantly review what you're doing on a regular basis, but also seek value with any subscription you're signing up for. Like, if you don't, like you mentioned, if you don't feel like you're getting the most value out of that, there's always another product. And so go and check that out. And then lastly, don't be afraid to cancel a subscription.
Right.
If you're paying for something like it, I know a lot of times we're like, oh, well, it's going to cost me more in the long run, but it's like, well, if you're not using it,
right.
cancel it. Big deal.
Right.
Like, save the extra money that you're going to get.
So
with that,
and I would jump in. If you are thinking of offering subscriptions, keep in mind, you want to put together a production schedule and be really thoughtful about rewarding those people for the money that they're giving you to create that content. So be very mindful of what you are capable of doing and what you will deliver to the people who give you money.
Excellent point. Yeah. So with that, I just want to kind of wrap the show up. But for those who want to get in touch with Sarah, you can connect with her on LinkedIn at Sara Munro VT. And I think, Sarah, you always ask people to put a note in there, right? What do you tell them?
Put a note. Yeah, drop me a note. Let me know that you saw me on Social Chatter, and I'd be happy to connect with you.
Fantastic. And I'm Christian Karasevich at Social Chefs, and this is Social Chatter, your weekly social media marketing news talk show. For those of you, by the way, who want to check out the blog post recap Sarah mentioned, socialchefs.com/SC327. With that, we'll see you all next Thursday, actually, at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I think we're going to have Mike Gingrich joining us for next week's show, actually. But with that, I want to thank you for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed learning about Instagram subscriptions. We'll see you all next week.